that he said, well, here's where I stay. You ever notice we never read about the house of Jesus? Peter had a house. Some of the other disciples had places. We never read about that with Jesus. He says, I don't have a place to stay. He's raised in a village that had no reputation for producing anything or anyone outstanding. When Nathanael first meets Jesus and he's told, here's Jesus of Nazareth, his response is, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? The implication is, well, nothing ever has. He's from a less than average city. He's got no place to live. He's a carpenter, essentially a construction worker in his day. Nothing wrong with construction work. But I'm telling you, it's not a highfalutin profession, then or now. He's a common laborer. He was not given to extraordinary good looks. He did not have an attractive appearance. We know that from Isaiah's prophecy as well. He has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, there's no beauty that we should desire him. He's despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. And that passage says a lot beyond how just Jesus looked in his physical appearance, but I believe it does definitely indicate to us that he wasn't particularly an attractive human being. He wasn't the quarterback of the football team, the prom king, or whatever. That wasn't him. In fact, I suspect to see him in the flesh, just to get a look at him, as he was walking as a human being, you would, from his physical appearance, see nothing whatsoever extraordinary. In fact, you'd see a man who looked to be beyond ordinary. He did not have a life of privilege. He had no formal education from some sort of prestigious school. You know, the Apostle Paul could say, I was educated at the feet of Gamaliel. There were great Jewish schools in this day, some in Jerusalem, some in Alexandria, where Jews could receive some of the best education in the world. Beyond that, you had schools, that were available if you wanted to go into the Hellenized world. Again, some of the greatest education of that time and maybe of all time, if you wanted to think about education in philosophy and things like that. Burgeoning concepts of mathematics that were available. So he didn't have any kind of formal education. In fact, the people were astounded. They marveled, it says in John 7 and verse 15, that he even knows his letters. How does he know his letters having never studied? He never went to school. He can read and write. Wow, they're amazed that he could even read and write. By every earthly measure, Jesus of Nazareth was just a common Jew from an underprivileged class of a reviled nation without a single noteworthy advantage in this life. That was him. Second passage in the book of Hebrews. Can you go there with me? Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15. We do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. He is touched with the feeling of our infirmities, the King James Version says. He can sympathize with our weaknesses. He is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. This verse emphatically declares that although Jesus was God in the flesh, when he walked on this earth, he still faced every area of temptation that you and I face. And so it says he was touched with our infirmities. The word infirmities means weaknesses, even sicknesses, shortcomings, limitations, vulnerabilities. And it says he was touched. But the King James Version, I really like that. It says he's touched with the feeling. The Greek word there is the word from which we get our word sympathize. It's sympatheo is the Greek word. We get our word sympathize with that, to feel our feelings, to feel with us. The claim is not that Jesus just kind of understands where you're coming from. You know, we say, I know where you're coming from, man, whether we do or not. Jesus doesn't just sort of kind of know where we're coming from. He feels what we're feeling. He is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He empathizes with every temptation, with every struggle that you and I face in this life. He identifies with you and with me. He has compassion for you and for me, for what you're feeling, for what you're going through, for what you're facing in every situation. You may say, well, he's never really been in my shoes. I think I've already shown you've never really been in his either. But let's leave off that for a minute. You may say, well, he didn't have ADHD. He didn't have dyslexia or some level of autism. Well, probably not, but I don't know that for sure. Okay, let's say he didn't. You may say, well, he wasn't schizophrenic or wasn't bipolar. Again, well, probably not. Maybe he didn't have any of that. I don't have any reason to think he did. You say, well, he never had to overcome alcohol or drug addiction. Well, that's true. He never sinned, so you never have to overcome anything like that. You might say, well, he's never been assaulted. Oh, wait a minute. There was that beating from that squad of Roman soldiers, that merciless beating, you remember? So maybe he was kind of assaulted, I guess. Someone might say, you know what? He never experienced stuff that women have to experience. He never had a baby. There's a lot of pain in that. He never had postpartum depression. He never had an abusive husband. Never had to be concerned that a man would take advantage of him or molest him or sexually abuse him. He was never diagnosed with breast cancer. So how can he understand me? You might say, well, you know what? As I think about it, he's never really experienced many of the specific maladies, the pains, the problems that many of us have, whether physical or psychological. And frankly, when I think about it, he was never diagnosed with stage 3 sarcoma, life-threatening cancer either. You know what? How could he help me? How could he understand? Jesus experienced the human condition. He was tested in all points as we are. That does not mean that he went through exactly the same experiences as we do. In fact, none of us go through exactly one another's experiences, do we? But we understand one another. We can sympathize with one another. And Jesus can do that so much better than we can, not only because he was human. He experienced what it means to be human in every regard except for sin. But he was also God. He is also God. He made you. He can look inside you. He did that as God when he was on earth. He could look inside people and not only know what they were thinking, but look in their hearts and know what they were feeling and know what they were about to say and about to do. Jesus knows you better than you know you. Please don't think that he cannot sympathize with you. He knows exactly what you're going through better than you do. He knows more about us than we can ever imagine. And you might say, well, here's one thing he doesn't know about me. He doesn't know about my sin because he never experienced that. But the reality is, again, this one thing that we think He could know the least about is actually the thing that He knows the most about: our sins. He was, as we read in Hebrews chapter 2, the propitiation for our sins. 1 John 2 and verse 2 says that as well. He is the atonement for our sins. He understands the weight of our sins because He had to pay the price for our sins. Nobody knows the weight of our sins better than Jesus because He bore them all on Calvary. He bore our sins. He carried our sorrows. Surely, the writer of Isaiah says, Isaiah 53 and verse 4, He has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Surely He has. And because of all of that, because He can sympathize with us so beautifully and so wonderfully, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I don't know what you're going through tonight. I don't know the pain in your life, the problems that you face, the struggles that seem insurmountable. I don't know. But Jesus does. And right now, tonight, He'll help you. If you need to come forward and name His name, come to the throne of grace and ask for forgiveness, for help. Won't you do that?